Does someone have the mic over there? Is it off? Good. You can talk and decide. I don't think the microphone will hear you, so. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live mapping session. We're the students from HDK's freestanding course between design and architecture. We're really excited you decided to click on and join us for our open window activation. We're going to start now by setting up the space, which you see in the frame now. This is where we'll be doing our mapping activity. And while that's getting set up, I'll take this opportunity to go over the term dwelling, which has been a key concept in our course so far. So just briefly, the word dwelling as a noun means a place to live in. And as a verb, to dwell means to live in. At the start of the course, we looked at Heidegger's building, dwelling, thinking, which is an essay that asked us, what does it mean to dwell? And also asked us how we might understand buildings as structures that actually belong to dwellings. On a very fundamental level, our group has at least understood that dwellings are a collection of objects. And for the purpose of this course, we're mostly interested in those objects which live between design and architecture, like the door handle or the pipe or the screw. As a part of an ongoing investigation, we're looking at the ways of understanding these objects from new perspectives by isolating and mapping them. A few weeks ago, we collected a range of objects from Hornbach that we felt were either important for a home to function or just caught our attention somehow. One of the first exercises we did with these objects was to describe them using different criteria, like what is their form, their assumed use, how do we interpret them, what do they invite us to do? Some examples of these descriptions are for the wheel, for example. So for this wheel, we said that its basic form is circular, triangular, rectangular, and yellow. For its assumed use, we said that it makes things usable. Its sensorial qualities are that it's smooth, cold, tactile. For affective qualities, we said that it's colorful, cute, and playful. We interpret it as something that maybe belongs to a kindergarten room or belongs to a toy. It also invites us to rotate, spin, and play. The next object, the doorstop. We said its basic form is triangular and wooden. Its assumed use is that it holds the door open or it puts the door in a place. Its sensorial qualities are that it's splintery but also soft, smells rubbery, is warm, organic, natural, light. Its affective qualities are that maybe it's shy and that it blends in, cute, but also seems kind of incomplete. We interpret it as cheap but also genuine. And it invites us to squish, to smell, and to touch. And for our last object, well, we're not really sure what it is, but its basic form, we said, is that it's round and triangular. It has a kind of star shape to it. Its assumed use is that maybe it's for fixing things together or for drilling. Its sensorial qualities are that it's sharp and hard, strong, rough, also loud. We interpret it as something that's timeless and old. It invites us to spin and to paint. Here are the other objects that we also gathered from Hornbach and that we'll be using today. So we're just about ready to start our mapping exercise. We really quickly wanted to add that you who are watching the live stream are really welcome to join us. We encourage you to sit on a floor or at a table and to do this mapping exercise with us using the objects around you. We can give you maybe a minute to grab some objects, maybe 7 to 10. For example, a cup or a pen, charger, phone, key, light bulb, remote, a vase, toothbrush, computer mouse, fork, razor. We understand the loose objects you have around you might not sit squarely between design and architecture like the ones we have here on our table, but that's okay. The point of today is really to play with the idea of mapping as a design tool. So we'll give you a minute now to grab your objects, and I'll warn you when there are about 15 seconds left. Okay, 15 seconds left. Come back to your screen if you're gone. Great, so we're going to go through 3 different mapping exercises this afternoon. For the first round, we've decided to organize the objects on the table by their location in a dwelling. So if you imagine a room, we're going to ask you and each other to place these objects in order of where we understand they belong. At the top of the table, we have one of the criteria, which is ceiling. And at the bottom of the table, we've placed another marker for floor. If you're joining along from home, you can interpret this round in a way that makes sense for the items that you've grabbed. So, for example, if you've grabbed objects like keys or a phone, you can line them up in front of you by where they most usually live in your home, from the front door to the wall that's furthest from the front door. So for the next 2 minutes, we're going to silently arrange these objects by where we believe they belong in a dwelling. After that, we'll get a chance to move some things around and change our minds a bit. So we can start the 2 minutes now. "30 seconds left. Okay, we can stop now. So in this next phase of the mapping, I guess we can call it maybe the negotiation phase, but we're going to give everyone a chance to move at least one or two of the objects in the map. We'll go one at a time, starting with our classmate on the left here. If you're following along at home with a group of people, you can also edit each other's placements one at a time. Or if you're mapping alone, then we ask you to spend this time to move at least one of the two objects, one or at least two of the objects that you've placed. Try to think of new ways of understanding your objects that might be placing them in a different spot. For example, if you put your house keys by the front door, but you're actually someone who usually forgets your keys in your jean pockets, maybe your keys travel further into your home than you originally gave credit for. Okay, so this is our final mapping of the objects when organizing them from ceiling to floor. Maybe we can just take a moment to look at the map that we've ended up with, and you should do so at home as well. Let's see if we can spot anything interesting that's happened when we've put some of these objects side by side. We also have a microphone here in the group who's mapping, so that can pass around and people can talk and reflect a bit on the map that they've ended up with. Maybe first we can just ask, what do you think about the end result? Is there anyone who disagrees with something or where one of the objects ended up?
Well, obviously we didn't disagree about this green electrical. I'm not an electrician, but I think they are more in the ceiling. And you think?
I think they're very maybe in like
Switch area? Or?
yeah, like maybe under a building, like, so that's why I think it should be further down. Yeah.
I think that maybe that is what one thing that is interesting is that we can see like the one object, the objects that were really easy to see where they were the ones that we moved first, right? And then these ones were like moving back and forth. Maybe it means that it can have multiple uses as well, and it's not obvious like that it has one thing. For example, this little thing where you switch on for the hot or the cold water is usually like in height of standing height or something like this, whereas some other objects were more, not obvious. What do you think?
It could be kind of floor level as well in a bathroom where you have the hot and cold water taps if you need to switch on and off. I don't know if that would be a knob you would use, but could be. And then we have this thing that we don't really know, so that could travel anywhere.
I thought this one was interesting because it's very rough. So I imagined it outside maybe, like in the ground. So I was thinking about the material a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, the same thing came to my mind when I was moving this pipe. That like I think because it's a pipe, we originally like placed it in the floor maybe, but then like the material looks kind of like I don't know, a bit more luxurious than this plastic pipe. So I thought maybe it's something that's showing, I don't know. So that's why I moved it more upwards. Yeah.
And also, like, for instance, this number 3 and this one, like, they are both like outside of your home, actually. So they're not a part of our indoor dwelling. And that's also something like they are reflecting. And I think it's interesting that they are placed on ones, each has their own side.
So do you think you placed those objects towards the edge of the table because they were kind of outside of this imaginary unit?
Yeah, I mean, they are important part of our dwelling, but they're not a part of the indoor dwelling.
Right,
But we might not function without them.
right.
But then this one could be in all levels, because I guess for a pipe you need more than one.
But I think this is not for like, this is for the roof actually. Oh yeah. So probably it's placed there.
Okay, well, we've successfully identified at least one of these objects, so maybe we can move on to round 2. So we can clear off our criteria and scramble our objects. This next round, we're going to map with the same objects, but this time we're going to measure them from happy to angry. Angry could be understood as an object that's really sharp with lots of points, or angry could be understood as an object made from rubber, which is a really threatening material. It's up to you to interpret what these terms mean. This time, we're going to organize our mapping around groupings. So we'll use our 6 boxes that we have here and label them 1 through 6. Hopefully this helps us keep track of our different categories. So I suppose box 1, if Erica could just point to it, could be understood as like very happy. And then box 6 at the bottom could be thought of as very angry. And all of the boxes in between could kind of operate like a scale then. If you're following from home, and if you haven't scrambled your objects already, you should do that. And create the 6 categories as you group your objects. If you have a piece of paper and a pen handy, then you can write them down to keep track, or you can just reference our map to be reminded of which corner is happy and which is angry. So just like last time, we'll have 2 minutes to silently arrange our objects. The time starts now. 30 seconds left. Remember to think of the different versions of angry that there could be, or different ways of interpreting what happy is in an object. Okay, so that's time. Again, like last time, we'll have a chance for people to move around some of the objects. Maybe this time we could say 3. No, 3 objects that you can switch around, but we'll start from the right. Yeah. And we're going one at a time. And you're not forced to use all 3. You just have them if you want to. Okay, so this is our final categories or groupings, I guess. Let's just pause for a moment, and those of you at home also look at your final mapping and see what new things maybe you can learn about these objects. Yeah, we have the mic, so if anyone wants to share something that they've noticed.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can start to ask. I think it was Erika who moved this sharp thing to the happy corner. And just why? It's so angry.
I think, first of all, it looks very cute and it makes you happy. But also, I don't know what it's used for. So it makes me interested and makes me like wondering, and I'm curious. And yeah, but I agree, it's sharp, and that's an angry.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, like, also 2 of the other objects, I think were placed there probably because you can interpret them into different things, like the pipe assembly. Yeah, this one looks like a monster or something like this, and then the other one looks a bit like a horse or some animal of some kind. So maybe this is also why you place this one. Like you can see it's as a face almost or something like this. And yeah, and also you could play with it maybe, so it makes you happy in that way maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
And these also has a very clear color, like this, very green and very yellow, and they sort of stand out from the rest of them. And as you were showing right now, they are like movable, and you can like spin them, and that is for me a happy feature. Mm.
Yeah, and I'm again thinking about the material, like happy and playful. I'm thinking about plastic, and that's why I moved this. And also, it has some rubber thing inside that makes you wanna like explore it and play with it.
Well, I moved the black one, the spiky, because it looks very angry, so I can agree why it was there in the beginning. But then it's also the playfulness that you could build it, like adding things and making, because it's a join. So it could be playful, but at the moment, it looks angry. But also like the spiky thing, for me, that's a unicorn. So I would rather move that to a happy place, because I just see a unicorn. Well, not the whole unicorn, but just, yeah.
But now it sounds like people were looking at maybe visually what some of the cues were for what is happiness or anger. Were there any other types of interpretations you were working with? I mean, you talked about material, but that was more like the tactile.
Yeah, I moved this because this stands for warmth, and yeah, I think it was a 6 before, and I'm wondering why it was so angry.
I just think that I sort of think about the color red so much as being hostile or angry in some way. So I'm not sure if I moved the object there, but I think that's probably the reason.
But also red could be love, and that's happy usually, but it could be sad. But hot could be passion and angry, but it could also be passion, happiness. Yeah.
And what about that it's a faucet, and so it like gives water? Or were you thinking about the function of these objects and that maybe it allows a certain comfort and so that's quite happy? Or
No, maybe you did.
I was thinking about this is very important in a home also, and we're always talking about like a warm home, and yeah, so that made me happy.
and like a light bulb, for example, gives us light in our homes, and
sometimes it's a nice thing to map these kind of objects as more of a feeling, like happy and angry. And then maybe when we don't need to think so much about the function, we can learn new things about them. And I think that's a big difference from the first mapping. It's when it's more based on the feeling. And maybe it's easier for us to agree on, for instance, number 3 and number 4, which are more in between and neutral. Yes.
was it difficult to maybe collaborate on this because we didn't set really specific definitions of what the criteria were? So, I mean, angry could be lots of things, like we've said. Was it difficult to kind of place something in that category when you didn't know how the person next to you was understanding angry, or did that not really feel problematic?
I don't know. I think like what's maybe like you said, we're also talking about that what could be interesting in like isolating the object is that you kind of see them in a different way. Like you only look at the object and you don't like analyze so much. Maybe like what's the meaning behind this? Like maybe you could be angry that I don't know, you need this kind of pipe, or angry that I don't know, whatever this electrical thing like represents or something like this, or how much it costs or something like this. But I think for now we only are looking at the objects in itself. I don't know, what do you think? Or how did you interpret the exercise?
I agree.
Thank you.
Well, maybe that's a good segue into the last round, which more explicitly asks us to consider those things that you're talking about. So we can clear the criteria, take away all of the numbers and the headings, and put the tables back together and re-scramble all of the objects. So for this last round, we're going to set up a graph and map across two criteria. The first being importance, and the second being sustainability. We have importance here on the vertical axis, and we're going to put sustainability down on the horizontal one. Okay, so again, there's lots of room to interpret these values and define for yourself what they mean. Those following from home should also scramble your objects now if you haven't already. This is our very last round, so we're going to give 5 minutes this time where we do the initial arrangement. And speaking is allowed. So talk with your friends, debate, negotiate, and then we'll maybe give a 1-minute warning this time. So you can start. So we're measuring each object's importance against its sustainability. Maybe, Lisa, if you wave, most sustainable is here. Yeah. And Erica, most important is up here. Yeah, exactly. And you can talk to each other if you want, or maybe you have chosen not to. We've got 1 minute left. Okay, so time is up. This is our graph. I thought maybe we could stand up and switch spots so you could see it from another angle. Um, and now you have another chance to edit and rearrange. You can also talk to each other during this time, but you don't have to.
Shall we explain our thoughts why we chose sustainability and importance, maybe? Like the hinge?
Yeah, sure. And I have a question about the 3, but you go and talk about the hinge and then we can...
As when we were talking, the hinge is good is in sustainability because then you can reuse the door without like breaking the door into pieces and build a new door every time. You can just open and close.
Mm-hmm.
Open and close. But then most of the objects doesn't work as just one. It would be good to be in pairs.
Or should we rearrange them now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's do that.
1 or 2 each.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like you want to make edits. I mean, the hinge, for example, what Melinda was just talking about, that sounds very important then. this idea of being able to open a door and not have to create a door opening every single time you want to walk through a room.
Well, I was just thinking loosely about like how we could, because we don't have like many objects in this corner, which would probably be the ideal corner, because then it's like important but also sustainable. And like thinking about, like, for example, how we could move objects to that corner. For example, like if we feel like this pipe is quite important, but we have it like in the least sustainable side. Like, is it because of the material, for example, and if it had been in another material, could it be placed in that corner? I don't know, like, for example, and also like this number, is it necessary that it's in that material, or is it that why the reason why it's not so much for the sustainability, on the sustainability axis, or why do you think we placed it so far away?
It's a good point. I guess that a lot of these objects could be placed on the more sustainability axis if we just replaced the material. And maybe we would only need to replace some of the materials. Like, for instance, this number 3. If it would have been in wooden, which would be the ideal material, it would be moved there. And the door stop is in wooden, so it's placed there, but it's actually not important because yeah, we talked about it before, and I guess it is because of your identity, that you have to belong somewhere. You have to have an address or a home. Like the government have to be able to contact you. So maybe the number itself, like number 3, is not important. But if you consider like what's behind the number, like questions, who am I and where do I live, then it's very important and belongs to your identity. And maybe that's paying bills and stuff, get your mail. And that's the only thing, I guess, of these objects that are attached to your identity and who you are.
So maybe do you want to scooch it up a bit, or?
Yeah, so maybe it's based on that. Maybe it's the most important. The packing. The packing, I think I placed here because it's very unsustainable material. Rubber. It's from oil. It's made from oil. But it's very important since if you don't have it in your sink, it will cause a lot of problems and irritating moments with water dripping on your floor. So it's super important, but very unsustainable. But I guess could also be replaced with another material, like natural rubber. But I guess that's too expensive to mass produce, maybe.
Yeah, and it's also kind of interesting to see the objects that we're replacing in this corner, like that they're not really important and not sustainable either. So, and I think also like this, for example, the joint for the ceiling, I think, like, is this even something that we need in our homes, or maybe it's because it's not really used in homes but more in public buildings, or I don't know. Yeah. So it's interesting to see like how we're not really, they still exist, but we don't really think that they are important. I don't know. Or could they be important in some way?
And then we have this happy, angry, round, spiky thing that we still don't know what it is. So it might be super important or not. So it would be interesting if anyone could tell us what that is. Maybe someone is watching.
Yeah, phone
Who
in
knows?
and let us
yeah,
know.
please. And we also don't know really that unicorn thing. We have we think it might be to join installation. Did we say that? But that's just our thoughts.
I was thinking that this kind of clear channel on the far end of sustainability is interesting because I was thinking about it when Lisa, you were talking, but we're kind of measuring all of these objects against each other. So we could take the entire space and just say whatever's on the far end of the sustainability measure is what we're measuring against, but the empty space kind of indicates to me that there's an understanding that there are more sustainable options out there, or like a aspiration for more sustainable versions of these objects, which is kind of interesting that that's been kind of built in to how you all graphed, even though you didn't necessarily talk about that.
I'm just thinking, I mean, sustainability can mean so many things, as in reusage is sustainable, but it's how sustainable was it to make it? I mean, aluminium to make new is not very sustainable, but you can reuse it, reuse it, reuse it, reuse it, so that it could be a very sustainable material when it's reused, because it never loses its, what do you call it? Character.
Yeah, and of course you could also like argue that things like the pipe and this thing is like vital for having water, which is like really important. So it's kind of also depending on how you what you read into the objects, maybe.
I mean, how did you all feel measuring each object against two criteria this time? Because that was something that was new, that was brought into this round. Did it complicate it, or did it maybe simplify the reading of these objects in some way? What happened?
For me, it feels like you have to think a little bit further than just like the angry and happy could be. That's very personal. It's a feeling. This is more of, you need to think about the material, but also the importance, like the number 3. If it would be a wooden one, it would be here. So you need to think a bit further.
Did you have to compromise like some of your understandings of the objects, because now maybe it felt very important, but it wasn't so sustainable, so it had to move?
But it's like the light bulb. I mean, of course, light is important for well-being and see, of course, but you can also use candles. So it's how important is it in that case, because light can come in different ways. You could probably, in daylight, you can catch the daylight with mirrors. Maybe you don't need to have light bulbs. Then during daytime, you know, in a dark corner, but also sustainability as in electricity. Yeah, so you have to think quite a lot.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that, to think how we sort of map importance, like from our own perspectives. I think like a lot of this sort of shows that what we're used to, like for example, that we put this pipe as it has like huge importance, but that is like probably because we are used to having this kind of comfort in our homes. I mean, for example, if you're having a different living situations, like if you live like in a hut in the countryside or something, of course this might not be the thing that you're placing as most important. Maybe the light bulbs that represents light, or the pipe that gives you water is more important. I don't know. So it's interesting to think about, maybe. And yeah, like for example, the wheel, like it's an important invention, I guess, but it's not maybe like vital to have in your home. I don't know. What do you think?
But then the wheel is very important, as in before we had a wheel. Yeah. So for the wheel on this planet, it's super important. But just this little yellow, playful single wheel is quite unimportant. If there were 4, still not very important in that size. But, I mean, I don't know how the planet would be without a wheel.
I think we have to move into our final thoughts. Maybe if everyone will sit down again and we can reflect a bit on how mapping in these 3 different ways felt. I know our goal with these 3 mapping exercises was to reveal something new about these objects. Do any of you feel like you've understood something different about the objects than you did before these 3 different rounds?
I think talking about the mapping, and because we all have different knowledges and come from different practices, we learn a lot from each other, I feel like.
And also when they are detached from their usual environment, it makes you see these new things. And I think that if an object is very well designed, you probably not even think about it. Like, there are so many objects that we have in our home that we take for granted. For instance, these kind of electrical things and the light bulb. Like, we don't usually think about them in our everyday life, but when they're not there, we miss them. Or like the packing. And I think that could be a measurement of something is very well designed, that is irreplaceable.
Yeah, and also just to look again like what things really matters in the home. Like, for example, the hinge is something that we don't maybe think about as a design object, but we see it's really important for us, at least in this group, and other things are not so important. And yeah, maybe it's like it gives a new perspective on that. So, yeah.
And as usual, you always have to make compromises, and I think that this mapping exercise could be a good reminder of that. Is a good thing to compromise, and you might see new things while listening on how, like, our classmates think about these kind of objects.
Argue your case.
And you have to argue your case, yeah. And you are forced to put words on this kind of things that you normally never think about.
I think that's a really nice place to stop, maybe. We have to wrap up now. We want to just thank everyone for watching and mapping alongside us. We hope these exercises revealed something new about the objects you gathered in your home or office, and that you're reminded that mapping is about discovery, and that really silly criteria like angry or super happy can be helpful when trying to know the materials and objects that show up in your dwellings or design practices. So thank you. Bye.